Oh, everyone, please, this is not football. This is totally different. This is like current affairs, what's going on in the world today, especially what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. What's going on? Also, what's going on in Gaza and Israel and Hezbollah, if you know what I mean. Hezbollah, Hamas, then you've got Iran involved. So this is what's going to be tonight. And I hope my guest comes on because my guest is a smashing fella. And he knows lots. And I'm going to bring him in. And his name is Dan O'Brien. And here he is. Hiya, Dan.
Good evening, Frank. How are you?
I'm okay. It's still worrying times, really. And I'd like your opinion. Now, you're getting so many stories coming from the Kursk incursion by Ukraine. Obviously, I don't think Ukraine organised this. This is definitely a British, NATO, American, strategy. That's what I think. That's what I believe in. Because I don't think an unelected leader, as in Zelensky, could come up with all this. I don't think so. So, what's your take on this incursion? Is it a big mistake, or is it a fantastic thing that these could actually take the Kursk Oblast, all of it I'm talking about, even the nuclear power plant, and also that they sent in a strike last night against it. So, what's your take on that, please, Dan?
Sure. I think it's difficult to know whether it was at the moment whether it was a Ukrainian planned operation, whether it was planned hand in hand or directed by the US, Britain, and the rest of NATO. Um, Obviously, there's a level of plausible deniability that the US, UK, and NATO want um, for the attack, the incursion into Russia, because for a long time now, Britain and other countries have been denying Ukraine the right to use Western supplied weapons to strike targets within Russia. Obviously, this is a big red line for Russia, and this is a way of testing the waters. So, whether this is a way of the West testing the waters in Russia, stepping foot onto Russian territory and attacking Russian territory with Western weapons, which is what's happening. Like the Ukrainian military is supplied by NATO, and it's military equipment from our countries, publicly funded, that's being funneled into Ukraine. But whether this is them testing the waters and having plausible deniability and saying, well, this is just Ukraine doing it, or whether it really is Ukraine in a desperate move trying to drum up more support for itself. Because again, Ukraine is entirely reliant on Western weaponry and material and supplies to continue the war. And you could see the panic after October the 7th when Palestinian resistance launched their attack on Israel, and Israel's response to it. So I'm getting a bit of feedback there from your mic. I don't know what's changed. Oh, I think it's gone now.
No, I haven't spoken.
No, sorry, I was getting a bit of feedback from the microphone, but I think it's gone now. But yeah, you could see Zelensky's panic. He was one of the first people to go over to Israel and meet with Netanyahu, and there's been a big panic in Ukraine and from Zelensky since then. Like I say, he's unelected, but he's panicking because he saw the well drying up essentially of Western support. He saw that being potentially all redirected to Israel. And now he sees that real threat of Donald Trump, potentially the next American president by the start of next year, who has said he will make peace between Russia and Ukraine within a day. And that reveals, Trump does have the American president does have the power to do that because this is a entirely American NATO pushed war. It's not, they don't control Ukraine like puppets. Ukraine don't do everything they say, and they don't do only what they say, but without their support, without the Western support, Ukraine wouldn't have been able to pursue the war against the peoples in the Donbass republics, against its own people, or to fight against Russia. So we're not certain yet, I think, whether this is a Ukrainian attempt at doing something, especially since the failed counteroffensive, utterly failed. But it looks like this is just another futile attempt at doing something because they've been losing ground steadily in the east, and they're continuing to lose ground now that they've committed a lot of their most modern equipment. Apparently, a lot of their most battle-hardened troops have been committed to this Kursk offensive, and all they've been able to achieve is taking a small town of 5,000 people. There has been some talk of, whether this is related to energy. There's a gas compression plant and monitoring station in Sudzha. There's obviously the nuclear power plant in Kursk, where they're aiming towards that. We don't know, but they haven't really gotten very far into it. So by all accounts, it's been a huge failure, and a costly one at that in terms of lives and material.
Yeah, because all the material that they brought in, all the heavy equipment that they brought in has been smashed to smithereens. But the point is, Russia are allowing them to stay there because there's no way out. There's no way out of Russia. They're all stuck there, and they're going to be annihilated, which they are every single day. They're being annihilated in the Kursk Oblast. That's what's happening right now. And Zelensky, he came out with a ridiculous statement the other day when he said, "We've crossed the reddest of lines going into the Kursk, going into Russia." And that's what he said. And Russia are doing nothing. Little does he realise that Russia is going to hold up a big offensive. And I'm talking about, if you look at the map here, hang on, let me do this. If you look at the map here, now there's Ukraine, right? And they've only taken a tiny bit of ground. People think that they've taken, look, they've gone right into and smashed, right into Russia, defeating it. There was only a military police there. The only military police on that border. So they went through, and it's around here. It's around here that they've taken just here. That's all, just here, around here. Now the point is, with them taking this little tiny speck where the Kursk nuclear plant is, that's what the plan was, to take hold of that, to have negotiations. You give us our land back. And this is what he wanted, was the whole of what Russia has taken so far, the whole lot, and that includes Crimea. That's what his negotiations are, and prisoner swaps. But we're hearing of atrocities as well, not by Russia, but by the Ukrainians. Did you hear that one? The French camera crew were there, and they were filming the actual incursion. And they went into this village, some little village, and they grabbed this old fella, 84 years of age, and they had German helmets on. Why they did that was going back to the Second World War, when the Nazis were there. And that's shocking. Even the French journalists were shocked by it. They were shocked, absolutely shocked by it. So what was the meaning of that, going in with German helmets?
Well, it's been promoted in Ukraine as a Ukrainian nationalism, as a as a counterpoint to obviously the Soviet Ukraine and the Soviet Union, but it betrays the reality of the ideology of the people that are behind NATO and this, the Ukrainian coup in 2014. It's a fascist ideology. It's one of nationalism. It's one of fascism, and that's what developed in the West after the defeat of Nazi Germany. Because in reality, the imperialists in the West weren't really different from the Nazis, not hugely. The difference between the Nazis was a huge level of internal suppression and internal persecution of populations within Germany. What the British, what the French, what the Dutch had been doing around the world was on a similar scale. We're talking millions of people. Even during World War II, Churchill talked about the diverting food from India, grain from India, while there's a potential famine going on there. And there was, in fact, a famine that killed a couple of million Indian people, and regarded it as nothing because, to quote him, Indians breed like rabbits. That was the attitude of, and still is to a large extent, that's the attitude of the imperialists towards other people in the world, because those are the targets of exploitation, those are the targets of war. And to do that, they have to be dehumanized. I mean, that's really where our whole modern concept of racism comes from, was the scramble of Africa, was pseudoscience dreamt up to justify why Africans were, in their view, lesser than other peoples, to justify the slave trade, to justify colonialism. And so it comes from that whole history, that whole legacy.
But doesn't it come back, Dan, right today, as you mentioned about the fascism, and yet Ukraine, Stepan Bandera, was one of the worst war criminals. One of the worst. They talk about everybody else, especially the Germans, but no, hardly anyone has ever heard of Stepan Bandera in Ukraine, where he actually he got rid of 400,000 Jews, besides Russians, besides everybody, because they were dehumanized and they looked upon them, and that's still going on today. And that's why, people, unfortunately, I'm talking about a lot of British people, don't realize why Russia went in February 2022. They haven't a clue why. They just think that, they invaded another country, and they didn't, because it was subhuman by the Kiev regime after the year 2014 Maidan coup d'etat, when they'd taken over a democratically elected president, threw him away, and the Americans put in a puppet regime through Victoria Nuland, of all people, an American, Victoria Nuland. So they started shelling and bombing the Donbass area simply because they were Russian-speaking people, and they looked at them as subhuman, and they still think that today. I'm talking about the Ukrainians now. And
we could see that in the comments that they've been making. About what was it you quoted last time about? Was it Poroshenko saying that they will, the
do you mean the children?
Ukraine? Yeah, the children in Western Ukraine will go to school, while the children in Donbass will be being shelled. But
the quote was actually, he said, our children will be sitting at their school desks being educated, while the children in the Donbass will be hiding in cellars. That's shocking. He's talking about children. Children he's talking about. And me, I protect my kids, you know what I mean, my grandkids. I protect them. And everybody else on this chat, they protect theirs. And yet he comes out, and that doesn't get mentioned, ever gets mentioned on British television news. It never gets mentioned. Why doesn't it get mentioned? Can you tell me, Dan, why it never gets mentioned?
Well, it comes back to these divides between interests and imperialism's drive for eternal expansion, which comes up against real people. And essentially, Russia, Ukraine, a lot of these countries are targets for expansion. So after the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was some revitalization. There was Western imperialism was able to loot the former Soviet Union, which was a great tragedy. It was a horrible consequence for the people of Russia, Ukraine, and the rest of the former Soviet Union, where it was the biggest plunge in life expectancy in the world. It devastated millions of people. It probably should be termed a genocide of those peoples. And what the West was able to do was move in very quickly with investments, with companies. What certain people in these countries were able to do, a minority of them were able to become oligarchs by buying up all the previously what was owned by the people, shared by the people, buying them up and taking them for their own use. And so as we come into more periods of crisis, our rulers, our leaders want more access to Russia, which has been rebuilding itself. It's been standing up for itself. It's been rebuilding its markets, rebuilding its industry, and improving the quality of life for its people, but not as essentially a subjugated state of Western imperialism. And Ukraine sits on the border of that. So in the west of Ukraine, you have the area called Galicia, which was home to the Galician SS division, the Nazi division during World War II. In the east of Ukraine, like you said, is more Russian speaking, and those populations have different memories, different understandings of what happened in World War II and who was fighting in World War II and for what reasons. The people in the east remember that they were standing against Nazism, that they were standing against fascism, that they were, the targets of that aggression, and that they nobly sacrificed a huge amount to destroy Hitlerite fascism. And the people in the West have been bribed and cajoled and inspired by nationalism, and that's something that's pumped in from the West as well, all this nationalism in the former Soviet states in order to peck away, in order to disintegrate. And we don't see a lot of this reporting because our country is on the side of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Our country is on the side of NATO. And you actually saw articles from 2014 right up until 2022. If you search archives, you'll see major news outlets talking regularly about Ukraine's neo-Nazi problem, Ukraine's far-right problem, about political groups like Right Sector and other groups going and conducting pogroms of gypsies, of beating any foreigners in the streets, of, they farm armed fascist mobs. And that's what came out in the coup in 2014, was a lot of armed fascist mobs, as well as a resistance to those armed fascist mobs. But as soon as Russia invades in 2022, that stopped being reported in our press. Suddenly we're all on side, and the news outlets are desperate to report on Ukraine without mentioning the Nazi problem in Ukraine, which is farcical, right? Because you have so many, we couldn't go for the whole year from like 2022 to 2023 without almost every press release by Associated Press on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, showing pictures of soldiers in Nazi regalia. Like, they couldn't avoid the amount of Nazis in Ukraine, and yet they refused to talk about it.
They try to deny it. They try to deny everything. That there's no Nazis there. There's no fascists there. And they try to deny it after showing pictures and everything else. I always remember I was going to do a project, and I had to go to this is the project. I was going to Napoli, I was going to Dublin, I was going to New York, and I was going to Odessa, right? And he said, well, how are we going to, you know, shall we go to Odessa first? Because that was the private thing. Said, well, we can't go because it's a war zone. This is in 2015. And he said, what do you mean a war zone? I said, well, it's a war zone. He said, well, we've never heard of anything like that. I said, well, there is. So we stopped it, we stopped the project because I had to get to Odessa. Anyway, um, then I got a phone call last year, strangely enough, and it was off one of the people who was doing it with me. And he said, you know what, Frank? He said, you're absolutely right about that Odessa, weren't you? I said, yeah. He said, I never had a clue. I never had a clue about it. Now, the point is, he's a very intelligent man. And as the Redbird says here, mainstream media is a massive propaganda machine, but the sheeple are so dumbed down, they believe the lies. Now, I'll carry on from that because I was watching a thing last week. Last week it was, Dan, and it was, I just put it on, and it was Radio Times, one of their little radio things, and they had a fella on by the name of Hamish. He was a, ex-captain or major or something of a tank regiment, British. The lies he was spewing out was absolutely incredible. Incredible. And I had to comment. I said, this fella's speaking a load of BS. I said, and people believe what he's actually saying. Blatant lies he was coming out with. And I couldn't believe what this man was saying. People that really think that the likes of Zelensky, who's got a little tiny bit of land in Russia, to the size of Russia, and they're only running around in their villages. They can't go any further. They're being annihilated as we speak now. But my point is that people, like as Redbird says, believe in the lies because they expect them to go on to Moscow. They expect him to go to Moscow. This is like, well, he hasn't got 20,000 men now. He can take half away from that now. With 10,000 men. They can't even take Zaporozhye, which is in Ukraine. They can't even take that. And they think that they can expect to take the Kursk power, nuclear power plant. Can you understand that? Can you define that from Zaporozhye to trying to take Kursk power plant, nuclear power plant?
I think in that respect, Russia is obviously defending the lines in Ukraine, obviously very well and making advances. And it really points to it's a different military doctrine that Russia is following. We're used to seeing over the past 30 years, especially like a Western NATO style military campaigns where really Western imperialism had free reign around the world to attack countries that were vastly inferior in terms of the arms that they had, the weapons they had. And so we've watched the US and Britain and other countries essentially steamroll through countries like Iraq, Libya, etc. We're not used to seeing a conflict like Russia and Ukraine, which are two relatively modern militaries, relatively equally equipped. Ukraine has had all of the arms and munitions that are available to NATO currently being pumped into it. Not the latest and greatest, but what represents a lot of the kind of current stock of NATO technology and arms. have been pumped into NATO. They've got Challenger 2 tanks being blown up in Kursk. They've got Australian Bushmasters. They've been delivered a few F-16s now. We'll see if they can find anyone to train to fly those. And it's all too little, too late. What Russia has been doing is a slow and the appropriate tactic for this war, which is slowly wearing Ukraine down. It's not even a question necessarily, although the military is being ground down in Ukraine. A horrific cost to human life, because now they've been talking about NATO pressuring Ukraine to start conscripting 18 to 25-year-olds. And Zelensky's been decrying his lack of ability to recall, abduct essentially all the Ukrainian immigrants in other countries who have left to go and work in Poland and Germany and the rest of Europe to earn a better living, because they couldn't do it in Ukraine because it was a Western coup state. They've been grinding not just the Ukrainian military down and all this equipment. At the same time, they've been developing their own military supply chains, their own logistics, their own industry. They've built up their own ability to produce shells and munitions, as well as cooperating with partners across the world like Iran, China, apparently DPRK as well. So they've built up their own supply chain and logistics and their own ability to wage this war, and energy as well. So that's a big thing why Ukraine, I think, is focused on these energy plants, these power plants, because they're going into winter. So not only are they not getting the material, they're desperate for the material from NATO to continue fighting the war. They're also desperate for energy, and they're going to be going into winter with a real problem that Russia is going to be able to hit more of the Ukrainian energy infrastructure. They've already been through rationing and reduced heating. Although, having said that, I was, quite, shocked when Kiev said that there was energy rationing. I don't know if it was winter 2023 or winter 2022, but they said there was going to be energy rationing in Kiev, and people couldn't put the thermostat above 16 degrees for the communally heated flats. That was as warm as it was going to get. And I was thinking that's warmer than I can afford to heat my flat on most days during the winter. So you've got, we're sending all this arms and money to Ukraine, and they're warmer than I am in the winter because we have this energy crisis
the most corrupt country on the planet. Zelensky is the most, well, I don't call him a leader because he banned the elections, and there are people in Ukraine who want him out. They want him out. They want him out of out of Ukraine altogether. They don't want to see him, but he's in a quandary because you've got the Azovs, and they're right behind him every step of the way. They're always there. Everywhere he goes, they are there. And he's terrified of them. You know that.
Well, that's why he's been caught between a rock and a hard place, because he was elected as the president for peace, right? He was going to end the conflict in the Donbass. But when he went to the front lines, he was essentially literally told by the fascists, look, if you end this war, we'll come and take you out, and we can do it. And, that's another reason Zelensky is desperate to continue the war, why he hasn't called elections, because I think we would see a pro-peace candidate win, because the people that are remaining in Ukraine, they don't want to fight anymore. They don't want to see the bloodshed. They don't want to see the destruction. But Zelensky needs to continue this war because of the corruption, because of the threats from the fascists that he's in bed with. As soon as his term is over, essentially, he's going to have to flee the country because everyone will be after him.
Okay, can I just read out two comments here? One of them is the Redbird here. Now I know this lad. Why is it never mentioned that it was black people selling black people for slavery? What kinds of people sell their own? Why no anger at them? Oh, of course, it's always white man's fault. Now, I do a lot about the slave trade, the dehumanization of a fellow human being. A fellow human being. That's what I've always said that. And I always talk about a fellow by the name of Chief Acre, who was rounding them up himself with his warring factions. And I'm talking about, the poor people of villages, rounding them up to sell them on for slavery, to the people who, these slavers. And also, friends of ours, but Redbird is absolutely right there. Absolutely right. There's no balance whatsoever with the slave trade, unfortunately.
Well, it's part of a problem where they want to divert attention away from the systems that create oppression and exploitation. So it's not anything inherently to do with being white that white people go out and enslave black people. Slavery has been a factor in human history. Well,
Yeah, well,
human history. The transatlantic slave trade was a bit different in its characteristics because it was under capitalism. But then they were going to slave societies where a lot of production is based on slavery. So we had a distinct period in human history, and this is long ago during like the Roman era, where slavery was the norm. That was how things were produced.
Well, I used to lecture about the Roman Empire actually, so I do know all about that. And you're right.
So for a huge period of human history, slavery was completely normal, and in fact, there are still a huge amount of slaves today through human trafficking and other things, which is just an indictment of the system.
Yeah, especially the whites, it was captured, the Romans, that is, when they went on the march to make their empire. And they just said to these people who were in the auxiliaries, you can either be a slave or a Roman, in the Roman army. So what would you vote for? Yeah, I'll go in the Roman army rather than be a slave. So that puts, we do know about slavery going then.
But again, it wasn't based on race for most of human history.
No,
slavery was just a status, and it could be anyone from Britain to Turkey to Africa. But the slave trade is a bit different. We have to reckon in Britain with what the slave trade was. But as part of the British imperialism, as part of British history, not just because of white and black.
Well, there'll always be an argument there. There always will be, because you've got a friend of ours, Stephen Mulholland, he says, "Hi Frank, the Ukrainian army are also being backed by ISIS and the alphabet soup of Islamist extremism. Russia has had many terrorist attacks, but Western countries won't condemn them. One happened today in Volgograd prison with hostages taken and 3 prison officers killed." So you see, it's happening every day. It's happening every day. Can I just read out these, because these are very important?
Absolutely. And just on that feature of terrorism, the Mali and a few other African states, they've been fighting this terrorism, right? And they've recently kicked out the French because the French have been fighting the terrorists for a long time, but have made it entirely impossible to get rid of the problem. And it's another method of keeping these countries in chaos, keeping them subjugated. And they're proxies for the West to destabilize other countries, like they were doing in Syria, for example. And so these are just another type of proxy along with Ukrainians. But Mali, I think it was, and a few other Sahel states have condemned Ukraine, saying that they've actually found Ukrainian supplies with the terrorists in their countries.
Okay. Well, ISIS. Who formed ISIS? You wouldn't think America did, would you? They formed them. America. And the Redbird says, just getting back, I want to talk about Frank Lawton here. Redbird, he says, people have been taught in school it is the white man who enslaved. They don't tell the full history of slavery, just teach what suits their agenda. I'm an ex-lecturer, and that's right. That's right. You know, you can't like say, oh no, it's not like that. It's not like that, Redbird. I'm an ex-lecturer, I'm ex-teacher, ex-lecturer. Anyway, the Redbird says, I want reparations from the Vikings.
Ironically, the Vikings ended slavery in Britain because the Normans were Vikings, and slavery in Britain only ended in 1066 when the Normans invaded and imposed feudalism.
Yeah, well, I'm Frank Lawton. Frank, if you're still there, I'm off Facebook because I got banned. I was hacked. And anyway, whatever this hacker was doing, I got banned for deceit and fraud. Unfortunately, it wasn't me, you know, it was the hacker who did these things. You should know that, from Frank, anyway. If this conflict, and you're going to love this one, and so will I, so will many others, I think. If this conflict has proved anything, it shows how weak Russia are in conducting modern conventional war. Russia has lost 575,000 military in this conflict. I wonder where he got that from. They only go to threat and resource as nuclear arms. Their resource is nuclear arms, and that's doomsday. Who's been talking about nuclear arms? Can you answer that? Can you answer that? You know, Frank's a very good friend of mine, great musician, everything. I don't know where he's getting this 575,000 military, this conflict, you know.
Well, that's the UK estimate, and
there
the
you
UK
go.
has quite a vested interest in one side of the war. So I don't think that's accurate. I don't know what the numbers are exactly, but I'm not going to readily accept the UK number for the number of Russian casualties, precisely because the UK has an incredibly vested interest in putting out propaganda that supports their side in the war, which is Ukraine. You know, they've been sending weapons to Ukraine. They've been encouraging Ukraine to fight Russia, essentially because they want a piece of Russia. So our ruling class has an incredible interest in promoting Ukraine as a successful project, while everyone else is saying now that actually we're not too certain that we're going to be able to support Ukraine. We're not too certain that Ukraine is going to be on the cards for next year, essentially, as most of Europe and you know, America to a certain extent is getting cold feet about continuing to fund the war in Ukraine, and the war in Ukraine is over without that funding and support. I mean, even with the funding and support, Ukraine are going to run out of people soon. So if you think Russia has lost 575,000 people, that means Ukraine must have lost millions of people, and not just from, you know, fleeing the country, which a lot of them have been doing.
Exactly. And surrendering in case, by the way, but en masse. The surrendering, does anybody know about that? I don't think so. I don't think so.
There are certainly horrific losses on both sides. It's a reality of war, and it's a tragedy that this war has been thoroughly provoked by NATO. But it's the NATO propaganda.
And we kept it going. Boris Johnson in April 2022. when he went out, they were going to sign in Turkey. They were going to sign a peace agreement, and this is what Zelensky was voted for. But he went over, and you know what he said? He went over on the orders of Biden, and he turned around and said, "Listen, don't be worrying. We'll sort Russia out. We will sort, you know." And as Frank says, Russia have lost. No, they haven't. And conducting modern warfare, how weak they are. Frank, look at the areas that they've taken, and they deliberately went in to take them areas. Nothing's happened. They haven't retaken them. And they're not fighting Ukraine, they're fighting NATO. They're fighting gangs of mercenaries from everywhere, including British. So, I don't know how you've come out with the week. So it's the British press telling you. If you would have come on at the start of it, I would have mentioned, I did mention about some fella named Hamish who was coming out with the most.
Well, it's the same as the reports that China is going to collapse within 2 years. Those have been coming out for the past 20, 30 years. China is going to collapse economically. It's just sheer wishful thinking and propaganda from our own ruling class.
It's all and you've got I'm sorry there, I have to come in when you mention China. You've got America going on about a little island in Taiwan. They're called Taiwan, who belongs to China. And they're provoking the dragon. Besides provoking the bear, they're provoking the dragon. They've always wanted to go to war with Iran. And have you noticed the axis now? Have you noticed the way it is? It's North Korea, it's Iran, obviously Russia, and China. It's absolutely ludicrous. Now, there's the Redbird saying, 3 police attacked with a knife in Manchester Airport 2 days ago. Where's all the media? And I've got to say these because I've got friends of mine. I wish David had come on here, honestly. I trust Putin more than any of our politicians. Last time I said that, I was told to move to Russia. I said, give me the plane tickets and I'll go. Excellent comment. And Frank, now, don't forget, this fella's a very good friend of mine. We're always arguing over football and what else, politics, everything. 575,000 is the estimate of losses. I guess you and Z can believe what propaganda that suits our argument. Nevertheless, you think Russia would annihilate the likes of Ukraine. Yeah, because I don't know whether Dan will agree with me there, but Putin he hasn't taken his gloves off. He hasn't taken it. They've got 1,500,000 troops, Russia. 1,500,000, if you know what I mean.
It's worth bearing in mind, like for this conflict, Ukraine has been conscripting coming up now, everyone over the age of 25. Ukraine has been conscripting its entire male adult population. It's been trying to get women to join the military as well, encouraging women to join the military. And as Frank mentioned, it's being supplied by the entirety of NATO. Russia has not engaged in forced conscription of its population. It's using its standing army, and it's called up reservists as well, reserve army. So if there was any stress or desperation on the part of Russia, we would surely see conscription being started, which would be very unpopular, I think.
I'm sorry, John, to interject there, but I've got to tell the people, where are we? There's America there. There it is. That big place there. The coordination of me it's shocking. There's America there. There's America there. And why are they here? Why are they all around here? I want to know why they are here, and why they're going regime changes all over. They tried to take Maduro out. He was democratically elected in Venezuela, and because they don't like him, they said it was fixed. And it's shocking what the Americans are doing. Shocking. They took Saddam Hussein out. Now, people believe that Saddam Hussein was one of these horrible people who killed her. And I don't know, Bashar Assad, barrel bombing his own people. This is what they were saying. They wanted a regime change there as well. Gaddafi was one of the most uh, horrendous leaders on the planet. People believed it. People believed it because they want to control all here. They want to control. I'll just take it, David. I'll just take it off a minute. They want to control the Red Sea, the Arabian Sea. They want to control all the seas around there. They want to control everywhere. That's why they're having a go now in China to control all the trade routes around the South China Seas, right over to Australia and everywhere else, right over to the west coast of the Pacific. It's just terrible what they're actually doing, all because of greed, all because of greed. And I'll just go. Can I just mention this lovely man here? Great historian, this fella, great archivist, and we're good friends. And he says China, with its Belt and Roads Initiative, has created a new imperialism through Africa, stripping the independent countries of resources to supply the digital age, with debts bringing them into the economic decline. See what I mean about, no matter how you talk about these wonderful things and different, I don't know, different opinions. They're not opinions though. They're all facts that what we get, and the likes of what David Jones and my good friend uh, Frank Lawton. Honestly, it's all this. And James MK. Well, Frank, NATO has surrounded Russia, part of Russia contract with Ukraine. That was what that. Hang on. Ukraine was that they do not join NATO, of course. And there was a coup in 2014. US, the world's economic forum, NATO, and Zelensky pushed to join NATO. And there's von der Leyen, wasn't it? Was it von der Leyen who said it the other day that they will join NATO? Ukraine. This is what we've got to put up with. All this Western garbage, absolute garbage. And it's just Russophobe. That's all it is, Russophobia. And Chinese phobia. I don't know, you say the Chinese phobia. I just don't know how to say it.
Sinophobia or xenophobia.
What is it?
Sinophobia or xenophobia.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. But don't you think, though, Dan?
But I think the comment about the Belt and Road Initiative and China in Africa is really interesting, and it brings into like why is the US, why is the Western Europe, why have they been on all these military adventures around the world? Why are they seeking to overthrow and destabilize so many countries? And this it's a bit of you can't talk about independent countries in Africa. I mean, well, you can now. I mean, with the Sahel states throwing off France. I mean, if you look at an economic map of Africa, and that was what Gaddafi was a threat to: the economic domination and control and deliberate underdevelopment of Africa by the West, because the West just wants to use Africa for its resources. And it's always something that the West does in its propaganda, is accuse its enemies of the very things that they're doing. And so the West accuses China of just going into Africa, to exploit it for its resources and leave it destitute, because that's what they did, and that's the only thing that they can understand other countries to be conducting themselves as. But the reality is, all of these countries, because they're capitalist countries,
But
they
the
need
African
to continue to
countries
grow.
welcomed China and Indo, Sam. They've welcomed them in.
Because they've offered much better prospects than the West. They've offered much better than the debt traps of the IMF, than the consistent underdevelopment. Like, they're actually building industry in Africa, which is not something that the West has allowed them to do. The West has allowed Africa to remain in a constant state of war and turmoil in order to supply the world with the natural resources of Africa, from coffee beans to the rare earth minerals for phones and laptops, etc. And it's the West that sponsored the mercenary groups in the Congo to keep the Congo completely destabilized, essentially stateless, in order for these mining companies to operate, extract these incredibly valuable rare earth minerals, incredibly valuable. Africa should be one of the richest places in the world. The whole of Africa could be incredibly well developed. The quality of life could be incredible for the entire population of the continent of Africa if it was actually allowed to develop, if it was allowed to use its wealth. And the same goes for South America. Why are they so concerned with Venezuela? Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. Why were they so concerned with Iraq? Iraq had massive oil reserves, and that's part of what US imperialism is based upon, is being able to control the world economically.
The oil flow. This is why they wanted regime change in Russia, to overthrow Putin, which was a non-starter anyway, from the very beginning, to overthrow Vladimir Putin. But anyway, I'll just go on. I've been trying to think. Have you been talking there? And I forget what country it is, but they put in a massive. This is China. I'm sorry, I forget what country. I'm sorry. Let's say it's Chad, for example. Let's just say it's Chad, and they put a road in, and the people, these villages, have never seen a road. And now they're building a railway station, a railway, if you know what I mean. And people have never seen it. Think about that. They've never ever seen, a road. Never mind a railway station.
The huge difference is that they are helping to build infrastructure that will help Africa develop. And that was always the excuse of, like, Western imperialism, right? Especially with India. We gave them railroads. We might have massacred a lot of them and starved a lot of them, but we gave them railroads. In exchange, we looted the country, essentially. But we gave them railroads. But if you look at the railroads and a lot of the infrastructure and industry, not just in Africa, but South America and other places, the infrastructure is not built for people to use. It's built only to extract the resources. There's massive train lines, but all it is to extract the ore from the mining site to the ports to be shipped out. That's all it's for. So it's a very big difference when China is building actual, there's economic infrastructure, but there's public infrastructure that actually serve the people of these countries as well.
Brilliant. I've just got to go through these. These are brilliant things. Hang on. The Redbird says the Ottoman Empire was one of the worst in history. This seems to have disappeared from modern day history lessons. Yet because it was all ethnic cleansing by the Ottomans, and it has disappeared. Quite right there, Redbird. Well done, mate. I'd love you to come on here with me and Dan, along with David Owens. I'd love David to come on. And David says, as a quid pro quo for US aid, the Ukrainian government have committed large tracts of its land and infrastructure to the US BlackRock conglomerate, which, as many of its investors are members of the US political establishment. David, you're spot on. You're spot on. Because do you ever remember, it was a few weeks ago now, Lindsey Graham, he let slip that there was $14 trillion worth of something in Ukraine. He let it slip. That's why they're there. That's why they're there. And Putin doesn't want to take the whole of Ukraine. But if he just go on to Odessa, he'll landlock it, and that's the end of them. That's the end of it. And James comes out. I want you to answer, David, by the way. I'll go back to him. I'll just go on to these. James MK. These are all my football fans, the fans of me podcast. They're all intelligent people, honestly. James says, plus look up at the Khazarian mafia. Ashkenazi Zionist called Khazar. Ukraine is full of Nazi ideology. Look at Lenin, Stalin, both from Ukraine. They came in the Bolsheviks revolution of 1917. See, they know.
Well, Stalin was famously from Georgia,
Yeah.
and Orthodox Georgian. I'm not sure what that has to do with neo-Nazis in Ukraine.
Well, okay. Ali Nus is in Romania now. He's a Romanian. And he says, good evening. Things looks bad. Very bad. I saw the interview when Putin said that he will use nukes when other will attack Russia. Ukraine army is in Russia now. I just hope nothing bad will come of it. And that, what he's saying, I think he's saying about everything collective, about Romania, China, and Lithuania, all these little Baltic states, being pro-Ukrainian. Well, they're not even pro-Ukrainian, to be honest. They're just being told what to do by America. That's all that they're doing. NATO. And look at the last 5 letters of Ashkenazis. Ashkenazis. Yeah. Ashkenaz. That's unbelievable. That. James, well noticed, says the red bird. The red bird goes on. I've seen videos of Nazis marching in Ukraine, and there are lots, believe it or not. I know there are. I've seen them. I've seen them. And even Dan mentioned that it was all on the news before. Just after the Maidan coup d'etat in 2014, because nothing was happening, you see. So you see all these Nazis with all the flags and all the, everything else on the tanks, everything. You see these people. And nothing's ever mentioned about the 40 people setting fire, they burnt alive by these same people in Odessa. Nothing is said about that. With Bucha, look at Bucha as well. They blame Russia for this massacre of civilians in Bucha. It was the Ukrainians. It was the boat, and now they know it was the Ukrainians. So why hasn't anything been done about that? Nothing gets done, and that's the shocking thing. That's the shocking thing. Nikita Khrushchev was a Ukrainian. Yeah, he was. I was going to say that, David. He was and that's who gave Ukraine, by the way, in 1954. 100% right, Frank. Thank you, Ali Minouche. Thank you. And James, I hate saying this word, Khazarian Empire, Georgia was part of it. It just shows you, though. I've loved this, Dan. I've loved it. Can we talk about? Can we talk a little bit about what's going on? And okay, let me start this. Do you think that Iran will strike Israel because they said, everybody's waiting for Iran to strike Israel because of taking out that leader a couple of weeks ago. In Tehran, by the way. He assassinated him.
Yeah, they assassinated Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, which massively backfired for Israel, because now Hamas is being led by their number one enemy, Yahya Sinwar. So it's the worst case scenario for Israel, but it's it's a little bit like the Ukrainian incursion into Russian territory. Israel is desperately provoking in order to intensify the situation. There again, Israel is similarly in a caught between a rock and a hard place, like Zelensky is. You've got Netanyahu, a thoroughly corrupt. Lest we forget, he was being investigated and almost jailed for corruption before he became prime minister again. A thoroughly corrupt, thoroughly racist, far right um, uh, leadership in Ukraine with extremists throughout the cabinet, who even a lot of the military and the media and Israeli society are getting fed up with how extreme and dangerous these people are,
Do you
and you can
think,
see the cracks
in one
inside the
word,
forming.
I'm sorry there to go in again, because you're talking about Netanyahu, and people call him Satan Yahoo, which is, just a play on words. But, like, he is a devil, to be honest. That's in my opinion. But having said that, do you think that he should be brought up on war crimes, him and the whole of his cabinet?
Well, if we go to the ICJ has obviously ruled that it's very plausible. There's a genocide in Israel. It's recommended arrest warrants for Netanyahu, but the reality is the ICJ is a completely powerless court. It's a tool of Western imperialism generally. Um, it's unavoidable for them to have to call out the crimes of Israel because everyone can see it. The Israelis themselves are broadcasting it. The soldiers are recording and streaming their war crimes live. It's unavoidable for the world to see that Israel is committing genocide, that is being inspired by the far right hatred throughout the government, which is a necessity of the settler colonial state to be able to cleanse the land of Palestinians. Right, they have to dehumanize and hate them, and it comes back to that dehumanization and hatred of the other group, instead of recognizing that working people have the same interests. It's a dehumanization to make sure that working class people fight amongst each other. So the ICJ, has again made itself kind of toothless by in the same breath saying that it wants to arrest and investigate Hamas leaders for war crimes. Now, they are, as part of UN law, conducting a legally recognized struggle for liberation in Palestine. The UN charters, the UN resolutions enshrine the right of an oppressed people to fight back, people that are suffering genocide, to fight back against their oppressors, to fight back against their occupiers. So Hamas and the rest of the groups in Israel are, according to UN law, conducting a legal, according to UN resolutions, conducting a legal struggle against the occupying force, against the genocidal force. But the ICJ has put out in an effort to kind of appease the West as well, which it hasn't effectively done, arrest warrants for essentially both sides in the conflict, the people committing the genocide, the people resisting the genocide. But the reality is that Western imperialism supports Israel. We've seen the massive amounts, again, of material, massive amounts of military aid from primarily the US, but, they're also supported to the hilt by Britain and France. Britain's been facilitating the transfer of all this weaponry. There's a lot of Israeli weapons and arms factories in Britain that are being, shut down by. Some of them have been shut down by Palestine Action, bravely occupying them and shutting them down. But the UK is still, through air bases in Cyprus, helping that transfer of arms and material to Israel to continue conducting the genocide. Essentially, Netanyahu, I don't think is going to end up in a court. I can't see this ending nicely for any of them.
Can I come in with a little bit of hypocrisy, to be honest? There's an arrest warrant, as you know, for Vladimir Putin. Now, the arrest warrant for him is for kidnapping 200 kids. And when you think about it, how pathetic. He brought them out of, the Donbass area because it was being shelled and it was war-torn to save their lives. Not one child has been killed. They all went to this fancy, I've seen footage of it. And people talk, the reporters talking to these teachers. They're teaching from music to gymnastics to, whatever. Everything that you're taught in schools, these kids. And they're brilliant, right? And most of them, the majority of them, have been given back to the parents because it's safer now where they were taken from, much safer in the Donbass area. And yet it's still out there, that particular arrest warrant for kidnapping. How pathetic. Now, what I'm talking about hypocrisy is that The Hague, this international court, wanted to put out an arrest for Netanyahu, and the Americans told them not to. I just don't. Everything that is being done now today, America just says no. And that's why, they follow what America says, especially Europe. I've never seen Europe so weak in all my life. Frank Carlyle said that he sees Russia weak. Where that came from, and I've never seen them so strong in all my life, Russia. I've never seen them so strong in all my life as they are today. And IBR Stella says what we're seeing is a BlackRock depopulation program in the Middle East. That's a very powerful statement, and is right. It's only what David Owen said before. Where BlackRock is concerned, there's trouble. Israel provoking, says the Redbird. No one's mentioned the provoking. Redbird, no one said anything about, Israel provoking anybody.
Well, I think I mentioned the assassination of Hania as a further provocation, right?
Because, that was provocation.
They've been bombing diplomatic consulates in Syria. They've been bombing Lebanon. They've been assassinating people in Tehran quite openly and obviously. And, you can say, okay, their war is between Israel and the Palestinian people. But
Absolutely.
They're bombing Lebanon, Syria, assassinating people in Iran. They're clearly trying to provoke a wider regional war in order to get the West essentially to go all in, because Netanyahu knows his days are numbered if this current crisis in Israel comes to an end. Because if you see the tensions in Israeli society between the ultra right, the sane people that are left in Israel, they've been storming military barracks. Even the military is getting really pissed off with the far right because they've been storming military barracks to protect the soldiers that have been accused of raping Palestinian prisoners.
Yeah, that's
you understand how insane that is in a society. And within the Knesset, they've been arguing about the morality and legality of raping people who have been detained by the Israeli military. Not to mention that there's some 25,000, I think, Palestinians arbitrarily detained. So they detain any, including children, they detain any Palestinian under military detention. They don't have the right to, a swift trial. They don't have any normal legal rights. It's a special military detention because essentially all the Palestinians live under Israeli military rule. Uh, not to mention the wholesale slaughter of everyone in Gaza and assassinations of people in the West Bank.
But did you see that little girl? Obviously, I think I told you the last time we were on. I'm not quite so sure, Dan. There was a little girl wandering, in the rubble. In the rubble, parents are being killed, siblings are being killed, and she was about 3 years of age, and she was filthy. And she had this. Someone must have put a dress on her. Well, they did put this dress on her, and it was a frozen dress, like from the play that what kids love, a frozen dress, a little princess dress, and that was filthy as well, bedraggled. And you see her walking in the streets, and they nicknamed her Princess. They nicknamed her Princess. She's dead now. She's dead, and this is what I can't get over. The things like that. And it breaks my heart, to see these kids. We protect kids, and to see these kids in war torn, I don't like going on about it, to be honest. And the Redbird says Putin is not the evil guy the West has made people believe. Of course he isn't. Of course he's a very strong leader. He was asking the West to stop since 2014, right up to 2022, to stop the genocide. This is what he actually called it, of the Donbass people. Because what the Kiev regime was doing, they were shelling them every day. 15,000 people were killed, and that's men, women, and children. Nowhere like so, none of them. It was all civilians. And he was asking the West to stop it. And when the West was doing nothing, no, nothing's happening. He said, well, I'll go in if you're not going to do anything. And they didn't. They provoked him. They poked the bear. They said, well, all right, let's go in and see what will happen. And they really thought that the Ukrainian army that was there for 10 years, 10 years being built up and trained by NATO forces. And there was the biggest army in Europe at the time. And they really thought that they could take on the Russians. Backfired. It's backfired immensely. And look at the way the whole of Europe has gone. Look at the way it is economically. We've got 4.5 million children below the poverty line here, and we're giving money to Ukraine. We're giving it to one of the most corrupt countries. Well, it is not one. It is the most corrupt country on the planet, and so one of the most. I don't call him a leader, but this fella named Zelensky, he's worth billions now, billions, because even the CIA, Burns, he said, stop skimming off. Oh, well, all right then. And he's still doing it. That's why he wants the money. Where's all the money gone? Where's all the arms gone?
Well, you can see all these leaders like like Tony Blair making millions from the speaking circuit. Nobody wants to hear Tony Blair speak, but that's his reward for facilitating the invasion of Iraq. And going back to the ICJ in The Hague, the US actually has a standing plan to invade The Hague should it attempt to try any American citizens there for crimes. That's how they treat international law, international diplomacy. That's how they view it. But if the ICJ had any teeth, if there was anything to it, why isn't Tony Blair on trial there? Why isn't George Bush on trial there? Why isn't Madeleine Albright? Madeleine Albright famously said she was asked about the these were the sanctions put on Iraq after the first Gulf War. And she was asked, there are estimated
A million.
10,000
Yeah.
children being killed, or 100,000. I can't remember the exact numbers.
No, what it was 10,000 children killed and 1 million Iraqis in total killed. That's what she.
Thank you. So she was asked about, this caused estimated deaths of 10,000 children. Do you think it's worth it? And she said yes, and that's their attitude. And then what happened after the Iraq War? Well, like BlackRock in Ukraine, Halliburton went in, and other US companies went in and made billions. They had billions in the contracts to rebuild Iraq and to build all the military infrastructure for the US Army and to essentially export capital from the US into Iraq. And that's really what all these wars come down to, is the fact that the US, as well as Britain, France, etc., rely on exporting capital. So that's why there's less production in this country. We've been deindustrialized. Production is moved from these countries, from our countries to other countries where the cost of labor is cheaper, and so they can make more profit. There's an eternal drive to make more profit, and that's really what's at the cause of all these wars, all this conflicts and oppression, is that instead of planning rationally for human needs, because we could feed everyone, we can find work for everyone, we can feed everyone, we produce in the world over 3 times as much food as the world needs. Nobody needs to starve, and yet there's 20 million children every year die of malnutrition, of starvation. We could feed all those children, but the reality is, if you feed all those children, then you start taking away profit from companies who have a vested interest in making profit. And so for there to be profit made, the vast majority of humanity needs to lose out, while the select few are able to accumulate more and more wealth. And that's what we see happening. And as there's less profit to be extracted from the cannibalization of our own countries, with the deindustrialization and then the destruction of social democracy, where our countries have become shells, essentially all the money is made by exporting capital from our countries, exporting money from our countries and investing it in other countries. But they come up against an issue that these countries don't want to be exploited. Venezuela doesn't want to have its oil used to buy more super yachts for American billionaires. Russia doesn't want to have its gas used to prop up the German and British.
Can I just say this about Maduro? Now, Maduro's been elected 3 times. 3 times. All democratically done, by the way. Not cheating, nothing like that. And yet, he's putting, because they were in a terrible state, before Maduro came in. And the economy there, it's getting, every term he's had, it's getting better and better and better. Even the ordinary Venezuelans have said he's a great man. Yet you have the likes of Blinken saying that it was a rigged, because he wanted to put this fella in, some fella named Gonzalez, and he didn't know him. He said, who is this fella? It's shocking the way, as I said, I'll just go through these, if I might, Dan. James MK. Most of the US media Congress has dual Israeli US passport citizenship. UN Hague full of hypocrites. You wouldn't think so. I think the UN is toothless. I really believe they are toothless. I'd say no notice of them now. Didn't realise how toothless they were. Soros is BlackRock. Absolutely, James. And Daniel says Israel are provoking. That's the Redbird. The Redbird's a great lad, by the way. Because I said that, we've never mentioned it. And he goes on to say, I stand with Putin. So does James, so do I. So do a lot of other people who's got a bloody brain, to be honest, Redbird. Look at the Colin Powell with his, weapons of mass destruction. 3 million dead, says James. It's all about money, power, and control. Absolutely. That's why, look, NATO, the abbreviation of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, they're all around the place.
Well,
They're all around the place.
NATO, as I'm sure you know, was explicitly formed by, well, Winston Churchill
Yeah,
instigated the formation of NATO immediately after World War II
yeah,
because they wanted
yeah.
to protect the interests of Western imperialism against socialism. It was explicitly formed to defend from the Soviet Union, to defend
Yeah.
from socialism. And what it was defending was essentially genocide and mass murder and colonialism around the world and the system of imperialism. And that was part of the shameful run up in World War II as well, was that Britain adopted a attitude of appeasement towards Germany, ignoring German takeover of territories of Austria, and just letting Germany and the Nazis rise to power because they weren't that as opposed to Nazi Germany as they were opposed to socialism. And so they wanted the Nazis to go after the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union actually attempted to sign mutual defense treaties against Nazi Germany with Britain and France and other European countries. And they all said, no, we're not interested in defending against German fascism. And so that's what, people talk a lot about the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, where the USSR agreed not to fight Nazi Germany, but it bought them valuable time to come back in 1941 and then absolutely smash Nazi fascism when the rest of Europe had said, no, we're not going to fight Nazi fascism. But yeah, Winston Churchill started NATO because it's an imperialist treaty organization. It was the imperialist answer to the Soviet Union. And in support of defeating socialism or communism around the world, Britain, for example, had concentration camps in Malaysia, beheaded lots of people. There was millions of people massacred in Indonesia. There was the Korean War, the Vietnam War, interventions across Africa and South America. And this was all to stop socialist movements in these countries that were quite popular and led by large parts of the population. And that's essentially still what's happening today. In Venezuela, for example, the issues with Chavez not diversifying the economy, but also you can see these issues that Maduro is facing because they haven't had the workers yet take control of the state. They haven't let the ordinary people of Venezuela completely take control of the state and the economy, or they're not at that point yet, rather.
But would you let America take over it? If you were a Venezuelan, would you allow America to take over their Venezuela?
No, but that's the people that are in control of, for example, the Gonzales, part of the national legislature. The same with Guaido. Fine, they represent the comprador bourgeoisie. Those are the people that are willing to sell out to America because they'll have nice lives at the expense of everyone else in the country, as it was before. They're willing to put their fellow countrymen into absolute poverty and destitution so that they can have nice lives. And that's the problem with Venezuela not taking over the rest of the economy yet. It's still in private hands. It's still in the hands of people that want to make profit, who want to do business with America, as well as that national legislature. And it's farcical trying to do the same thing they did with Juan Guaido 5 years ago. They tried to do the same thing with Gonzales, but he actually backed down a week or two ago and said, "No, I accept the results."
He's living in Miami.
Yeah, that's where all the reactionaries go.
I love that. I love what you comment there. Ali New says, "Now don't forget this lad's in Romania, and I've got to speak to him on Sunday, and or tomorrow afternoon. I'm not quite so sure." Because he's very unhappy there, US always gets involved in everything what's worth petrol, gold, or other resources. And the Redbird, monkeypox seems to be branded about these days. Is this going to be another ruse for a lockdown? I wouldn't put it past them. I think you're spot on there. And it is, because we are My sources have said that don't be surprised if a lockdown fairly soon. IBR Stella, there will be massive food shortages coming in 2027 as net zero will destroy the UK food supply chain, and the EU is doing the same. The EU is in Brussels, these unelected bureaucrats, the likes of von der Leyen, Ursula von der Leyen, they're absolute lunatics, them. And she's corrupt there, by the way. There's a few corruption. And I wonder how, what's his name? Oh, I forget his name. And he was thrown out. You know, the Irish lad, the two Irish people.
Oh yeah,
Daly and Mick, I forget his second name. And yet they were defeated. And they're no longer MEPs, and I think something phony went on there, especially the two of them, because she's spoken out against everything. But this is, I think there's only the lads on here, you and me, Steve Mulholland, and Ricky, and a couple of others who know the score. Who know the score of what's going on today.
well,
And I can't believe, Dan, I can't believe. So, like some of my friends, even our kids said, and I was trying to put them straight. Why? Russia went into it, and he didn't believe it. He said, oh, not that. That was happening. He just wanted to go and invade her.
Well, the reason they've banned RT and they've banned Press TV is because they don't want, for our free and democratic society, they don't want people to see alternative media. They don't want people to see the other side of the story, because we know that Russia today represents Russia. It's not objective truth. There's no objective truth media outlet in the world. There's no just facts. Everything reflects the views and values of where it's produced. Russia Today reflects the views and values of the Russian ruling class, like the BBC represents the views and values of the British ruling class. It's what they want you to know, right? And to deny people the ability to compare news articles, to compare media outlets, and do their own critical thinking is ridiculous. But I think any lockdowns, anything like that coming will just be used as another excuse to, one, cover up. The last lockdowns covered up another economic crisis, another economic crash, as big or bigger than the one in 2008. Because you've seen, as we've come out of those lockdowns, look at inflation. Like, prices of things have doubled, have tripled. The cost of living has soared. The amount of children, as you say, in poverty has risen drastically over the past few years. Things are getting worse, and it was able to cover that up because suddenly people couldn't go out and spend their money. They had to stay in and not realize so much that their standard of living was dropping so much that their jobs were gone, not because of coronavirus, but because of economic collapse and crisis. But I can't remember who it was saying that people are blind and just believe what the media tells them. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I think people have better instincts than that, and I think people see through the lies. I speak to a lot of people who, they don't know what the truth is, but they know that they're being lied to. They know that the BBC isn't telling them the truth. They know that the newspapers aren't telling them the truth. They know that something is going on, and that they're trying to convince them that, oh, well, the war in Ukraine is a great jolly against an evil tyrant, and similar things like that. And that, the Palestinians, everyone that supports Palestine is a terrorist, and Israel are, good crusaders cleaning up the Middle East. All of these propaganda talking points people are looking at and thinking that can't be right, that can't be true.
And people don't realise, that the sanctions on Russia It was from 1924 when the Reds versus the Whites, who was full of Americans and British. They defeated them, and they've been sanctioned ever since then. Obviously, the Second World War, and then the Cold War after that, and they've been sanctioned. Yet they won the space race.
Well, I think that's it shows you the incredible power of socialism and what the Soviet Union was able to do. Like you say, winning the space race, putting the first people in space, all that kind of stuff. But not just that, feeding everyone, housing everyone. There was no homelessness in the Soviet Union. There was no starvation after the Second
No,
World War.
and
Obviously,
there's not today, Dave. There's not today. Or when Putin took over. Have you never? We lens on this. If you don't mind, I'll just go through
sure.
these. And I want to ask you: have you ever heard of some certain fella? I want, I, must, I want, I want your opinion on. Right, the UN came from the League of Nations. It's built on land donated to them by Rockefeller Foundations on US soil after World War II. It was on the site of an old meat factory. Well, an old meat factory, I didn't know about that. You learn something new every day. I didn't know anything about that. And James says, carries on by saying, Mick Wallace it was, thank you.
Yeah.
And he did speak the truth. Him and Claire Daly. I love the pair of them. Won't listen to anybody else. That stupid Brussels. He lived in the next county, he says to him, to James. And he says, look, if people fall for those prison lockdowns again, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on you. Beware of the hamster pox, the boogeyman under your bed. Be scared. It's all fear porn. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a brilliant comment to end on. But I'm going to ask that. Have you ever heard of a fellow by the name of Bill Browder?
The name rings a bell, yeah.
Well, Bill Browder is a Putin hater. Now, do you know when Yeltsin was in power? He went in because, as you do know that Russia has so many resources. They've got a lot. I think it's the only country with so many different resources. And that's what the Americans love to get their hands on. And when Yeltsin took over Gorbachev, uh, he was just a drunken man. And he was told what to do by the Americans. And Bill Browder went in with his lot and was, as Putin said, he was stealing our resources. He was stealing our resources. That's why we kicked him out. Bill Browder, you see him on the telly now and again, and I seen him last week on something. It was on YouTube, and I seen him, and I went and clicked him on. The hate he has for Putin, and he thinks that, the likes of this Kursk invasion, it's going to go all the way to Moscow and take out Putin. Absolutely, he hates him. But anyway, will you come back on again? Is Friday okay for you?
Yeah,
Sounds
absolutely.
Oh, brilliant. It's been brilliant
Always
tonight.
pleasure. And if I could just have a minute just to say that,
Yeah, go on. Go
with
on.
with Bill Browder and everything, this was, the mistake that the Russians made. They were disarmed ideologically. And a similar thing with China, where they thought that if they just adopted the market, if they just adopted capitalism, they started trading with the West, that they would be seen as equals, that they would be part of that world and they could interact normally like that. They didn't realize the teeth behind the smile of the Americans and Western Europe and all the imperialists. They didn't want to work with Russia. They didn't want to work with the former Soviet Union. They didn't want to work with China. They wanted to exploit it. They wanted to loot it. And that's what they didn't realize. But that's what these countries are starting to wake up to now, the reality that no, they can't peacefully coexist with Western imperialism. because Western imperialism will always be coming for them. And now that they've woken up to that and are starting to fight back, we're going to see a very different world, I think.
Yeah, and the first person, well, Putin fought back by chasing the likes of that crowd that'll go on, sod off. And, don't forget, this all started, the Russophobia really started when it was the G8. And I questioned all of a sudden the following year, it was only the G7. I said, well, why is Russia being kicked out? And that's where it started, because it was, don't forget, seeds are sown for everything years before everything. You've only got to say about the First World War when Bismarck, united Prussia and Prussia and Saxonia into Germany and made it one mighty Germany. And even the Schlieffen Plan in 1891, where they draw in the French and the British and French soil, defeat them and march on to Russia. So everything, all the seeds are sown years before, and it's shocking. Can I just go through these? UK column news have a great concept. I've never heard of them, IBR. I've never heard. Are they on YouTube? Let me know. TW says, great show. Wow. Oh, that's nice. Thank you. And IBR, Redbeard says, IBR, yes, they are good. I've never heard of them. And James says, look, if people fall for those prison lockdowns again, oh yeah. I read that, didn't I? Social engineering, Frank. And Ray Thompson. Now, James comes from Ireland. Ali Noose comes from Romania. Ray Thompson comes from Portugal. So we've got an international audience tonight. Anyway, he says, even if Frank, every time I think of politicians and the corrupt capitalist world we all live in, I always go back to Eric Blair, aka George Orwell. The man was an absolute visionary and read the way the world was heading. Yes, of course. Of course, there was great visionaries. I even go back. I go back to, I'm not talking about Nostradamus, I'm going back to Leonardo da Vinci. I'm going back to the wonderful Jules Verne and H.G. Wells. They were great visionaries as well. And I think that's absolutely. So, what do you think of all the comments as well, Dan?
Yeah, a lot of variety, a lot of things to maybe discuss in more detail. Like it's
Absolutely.
difficult to go over like every topic, and like as a historian, I think you were quite right when you talk about the seeds are sown a long time before. Like the world is how it is because of the way it was, and the world has developed to the point it is today throughout all of human history, and the seeds were sown, not just 10 years ago, 100 years ago, but even thousands of years ago, and to come to an understanding of why things have happened is it's almost like that cliche of a child asking why. Well, because of this, and so we can come to understand and explain everything, but it's part of the goal of human life, I think, is to develop your understanding of the world, and that was for me coming to understand why there are so many problems in the world. Why is there starvation and hunger when there's so much wealth, there's so much plenty around, and yet there's so many people without? Why is there war? Why are people fighting? Surely people can figure their differences, their problems out without killing each other. But then coming in to understand how the world had developed to the point it was, and then how we can change it. And that's the only way to be optimistic and not pessimistic, and to have faith in humanity that we can change the world and that we will change the world for the better, and that we can end exploitation, that we can end war, and we can stop all this killing and madness and greed. But I think it's becoming more and more urgent to do that today.
Yeah, absolutely. Because as I mentioned before, there's 4.5 million children below the poverty line, and I've still got friends who are teachers, by the way, um, feeding the kids. They feed them. Think about that. And it's shocking. It really is shocking. But we can talk about, the next time, if you don't mind. Let me just see where, if there is an escalation or what, by Iran. And we'll see what, if the likes of the Kursk nuclear power plant has been badly damaged, and that leaves us all in a bad way. I'm just going to. Oh, that's lovely. You know, James says, "Great show, Frank and Daniel." Oh, that lovely. Thank you,
Thanks,
James.
James.
Thank you. And Paul Turner. I'm not really a follower of politics, but I thought I would listen to yours, and it's been a real eye opener, especially on Putin and Zelensky regarding Ukraine and Russia. You see what I mean? People don't realise, and this is what you and I have been trying to put over. You know, look, we're just saying the truth. We're not propaganda. It's just the truth. And
That's
the
the thing.
truth
I
is,
don't like politics either. I hate politics, but
I did,
it's
I did, I
it's
did.
important to understand the world, what's going on in it, and why. And if we're going to change it, we need to get involved and engage with it.
I've got a friend who's a colleague of mine. To be honest, I was working down at U Bird, and yeah, let's see what he said. I'll just tell you what he said. You go, you what? What I say about this former colleague of mine. And he says, John Lennon sang Give Peace a Chance. Spot on. Spot on, James. Spot on. Even in Frankie and Guest and chat, they're all for us off the Anfield Road. He never fails, He never fails. The Redbirds was on before the Anfield. The Redbird. Um, this I was having a drink in Dale Street, and I won't mention this fellow's name. And he became leader after Farage, actually, when for UKIP. And he came up to me. Now he's a former colleague of mine. I've been asked to be a councillor, everything. I refused the gong as well because of Hillsborough. Anyway, he came up to me and he said, "Hello, Frank." I went, "Hello, Dan, how are you?" Talking to him. And I knew what he was, obviously. And he's a member of Parliament, a member of the European Parliament. And he said to me, all serious he was. He went, "Frank, can I have a word with you outside?" And I went, "Yeah, okay." So we went outside. You're going to love this, Dan. He went, "We've got a seat and you will be ideal for it." He said, "I'll even bring you over to Brussels and show you around." He said, "And you will win this seat. How would you like to be a member of our party?" Do you know what party it was? UKIP. UKIP. I said, "Are you joking? I'll be lynched. I'll be lynched." And he knows my values as well. My socialist values. I'll be lynched. But anyway, that was nice lads actually, but different politics and
There's yeah, good few people in, well, were in UKIP. And it's just they're looking for the answers, but they've come to a different conclusion. So it's, for most of those people, I think it's a real problem if the left think, well, we can't talk to them because they're all racist and evil. They're not, most of them. The
I
vast
know
majority are just,
it's mad. It's
I
mad.
would say, wrong.
Do you ever go on? Obviously you go on YouTube. Have you ever watched that Nova Media? Is it Nova
Oh,
Media?
Novara.
Yeah, that's it. A fella named Michael Walker and the other lad, and they're the same as the Western press over Ukraine. I couldn't believe them.
They're just there to divert people who are progressive. They're looking for, again, it's on the other side. They're looking for answers, right? Of like, how can we stop child poverty? How can we make sure people have houses? So they direct people who are starting to think that there's something wrong with the system and that we can change it. And they're there to direct people back into the mainstream. Well, actually, we have to go to war with Ukraine, with Russia. We have to support Ukraine, and all these kind of things. They bring them back into the mainstream fold. So it's acceptable under our current system to say that maybe we should tax the rich a little bit more and have a little bit more for the rest of us. But you can't
Yeah,
question
absolutely.
where that wealth comes from, where that exploitation comes from,
Yeah.
and why we need rich people. And the truth is, we don't need billionaires flouncing around on yachts. We don't need to all be working for their benefit while we go further and further down in misery. We can run society for ourselves. But the minute you start saying that, you stop getting invited on talk shows and promoted and
That's
advertisements. You lose
that,
your career.
of course, and they could have easily have lost their career as well, but they just go along. You agreed with them over certain things, not about Ukraine, but over Gaza. You did. Oh yeah, that's great. That what you're talking about. And then you've got the other sides, which became Ukraine and Russia, and then I had to turn them off in the end. I couldn't bear it. But anyway, Paul saying it, all I've heard is being Putin being the bad guy and Zelensky being the innocent guy. But listening to this, I've seen it differently. That's great, that. Thank you. The Anfield Raw. Question for Frankie and Daniel. Do you think governments like I do are the real reasons all humans are at each other's throats? Or do you feel there is something inside humans that is designed to be bad? That's something else. That's fantastic. I'm gonna ask you to you answer that. I know what
Yeah,
I want to say.
yeah. So I don't. It's not governments or people. So what governments are there for are to regulate the ruling class in society. So it's not people like Tony Blair, Rishi Sunak, Keir Starmer. They're not making the decisions. They don't have the power in society. The people that have the power in society, the people that can decide, well, I'm going to move 10,000 jobs from your country to another country. I'm going to stop importing steel from you and start importing it from another country. Those are the people with power. They decide how everything in society is produced and distributed. But again, they're sitting on top of a chaotic system, so things don't always go their way. But what governments do is try and regulate the worst excesses of that. So like they would, through that system, through the drive, through the greed of capitalism, like trying to make profit above all else, and the insatiable drive to generate more and more profit, because otherwise they go under, right? They lose their business, they lose their position, status, and power. The
They're all
governments have to regulate that because otherwise they literally work people to death. They had to bring in laws restricting in Britain, laws restricting the hours that children could work. And
yeah,
that was only in the 1800s that they started restricting how long children could work because they were literally working children 12, 14, 16 hours
Well,
a day.
you have two, believe it or not, you have two acts. You had one in 1870 and one in 1880. One was the Forster Act, where, children, they asked children to go to school. Now, you're a little kid running around and and all of a sudden you've got to, you haven't got to. But it's up to the parents to send you to school, but they couldn't be bothered anyway. So the kids were just running around. And it wasn't until 1880 and the Mandela Act, and that came out, and it was compulsory that children had to go to school, because we were all street urchins, as you know, for centuries, street urchins. And I did have it. I'll read you it out in 2 weeks' time.
Okay. Just to finish off the.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. No, it's good. All knowledge is good. But yeah, so it's governments are just there to regulate the economic system that we live under. But humans aren't inherently bad. Humans are inherently social creatures. If anything, we want to help each other and support each other. I don't think anyone truly believes that humans are bad, because we see all this horrible stuff that the society that we live in forces people to do, whether that's from an economic point of view of saying, well, this is how the economics works, and I need to invade this other country in order to make more profit, essentially. And then all the propaganda comes down to make you hate the other person, so you go to war with them. Ordinary people go to war with them against our own interests. This propaganda is a powerful thing. We're inculcated in society. It's very powerful. It makes us do things that we don't really want to do. And we see how much it messes people up, how people coming out with PTSD from war because they've been forced to kill other people, because they've been forced to be inhumane. But there's nothing inherently bad in humans. We have the capacity to do good and bad, but I think as social animals, we want to help each other. That's my first instinct when I see someone in distress or in need. And I think that's the instinct of everyone else, unless you've really been, had a number done on you by life in society.
That's why I was saying, Dan, about protecting our kids. I've got a smashing little immediate family. I've got a grandson who graduated in law. I've got another grandson who's just, he's finished his college, and he's just become a plumber, as they say, and he got it through today. And I've got a little granddaughter who plays the piano, and from the age of 4 or 6, I'm not quite too sure, she could read music and play the piano.
Amazing.
So, it's I have to say it. Dan. It's how you brought up as well. It's how you brought up, and I obviously you're the poshest fella I've had.
I'm not actually that posh. I'm just from the south.
Possibly. Anyway, that's a great question. Thank you, Anfield Raw. And I hope Tom's answered that. I didn't want to answer it. Ray Thompson from Portugal. Certain powers to remove history from the school curriculum. Absolutely. Is this another tactic to try to brush the truth of colonialism, thievery, and piracy under the establishment carpet? I'm going to read you, Dan. Like when you're coming on, do me a favour, just send me a message, because I know Jason's not listening then tonight. Just send me a message.
Yeah.
About what I want to read you, and I'm not telling you his name because you'll only look him up and read it yourself. But I've got it somewhere here, and I will read you it. And I'm going back to 1794. The time of Blake and these wonderful poets. But it wasn't a poet who said this. But I'll read you it out. It's incredible.
I'll look forward to it.
Honestly, so remind me, who's the reverend, that's all, and I'll get it, and I'll read it. I'll read it out to the rest of the the chat. From media to unions, all are against human beings and to make us all subservient, says the Anfield Law. Absolutely. Absolutely. Governments have us boxed in. They love us fighting each other, says Yusuf. Yes. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. And, blimey. He's a great lad, you know. I haven't even seen this fella. Keep getting stuff from books. Yeah, I see who you brought in. James says, love the money, the root of all evil. Good night. Yes. Everywhere in the world, countries seem to be at loggerheads with each other. We'll talk about him as well in a couple of weeks. Do you mind?
No, absolutely.
Gonzalo Lira. Thank you, IBR. Thank you. We'll talk about him because people won't have a clue who he is. The Anfield Road. Ukrainians and I hate to say this were some of the worst culprits in Nazi regime. You should have joined us at the beginning. Every country is no angel, but if you want ends and overthrow us and remove us of peace in the USA, is the USA. I like the USA, but, and that's me. That's me as well. But you've got to look at the way the USA is today. I stream the USA, and some of the city, even San Francisco, it's on its knees. And it's all through this administration. And did you hear what Kamala Harris said last night at DC when she was giving out her speech? She said, I'm going to, do the mistake. I'm going to fix the mistakes, I'm paraphrasing, from what the last government has done. She's talking about her own.
I think she's too drunk to realise.
I think she's one. I'm not a sexist, never have been, never will be. Love women, I love women. But she is. I'm sorry. Did you hear what she said? I'm a Afro-black person. Afro-American, I'm sorry. And she wasn't. She's an Indian. She was born, her dad was an Indian. And that's what she said, Afro-American. And she's not. Oh, keep that stuff. You keep. I'm not on Facebook anymore. I've been thrown off and they'll never let me back on again. Hey, Frank, a quick question. The Rotunda, or that green and black anchor type thing on the corner of Great Ormond Street and Scotland Road, was it off a ship called the Rotunda? No. No, people have said that before. It was off. It was off a famous ship actually that got torpedoed. I'll tell you on Monday night when I do my history show. If you're looking, Keith, I'll definitely tell you that. What's the bloody name of it? You caught me there on the hop. But it's a very famous ship, which we all know of. Yet I can't name it because I forgot the bloody time.
You test every day.
Yeah, well, this is it. You see, I always get asked questions when I'm out. I answer them, majority of the time, but some of you just go, sorry, I can't think, because it goes out your mind. It's there, but it goes out. The Anfield Road, my nan and mum were both from Tocky. And my nan used to say when she was brought up in Kingsley Road, they had no lights and it was run down. They moved to Arundel Street. She loved those times. Yes. My mum's side were Italian and they moved to a place called Gerrard Street. And I'm not saying it was run down or anything, but they had no electricity, they had nothing. And then all of a sudden, these tenements were built. And they moved in there. They had their own bathroom with running water and a bath. They had a sink in the bathroom. You know, they had a hallway. They had bedrooms. They had a living room. They had a kitchen with a boiler in, you know, for the hot water. You know, I'm talking about a fire hot water, you know, when they put coal on the fire.
It's easy to forget today that those conditions weren't very long ago. They were still moving people out of the slums in 50s, 60s, 70s.
Look at you and I now. Look at you and I now. We're talking on this thing. The technology is incredible. And we're going out to these wonderful people out. These wonderful people, if you know what I mean. No, but Keith, the returns has always been there long before that particular anchor. Because why it was called the Rotunda was, I hope you can see me, right? The building was on a corner and it went round. It was a theatre and it went round. Hence the Rotunda. That's what it was just called, the Rotunda. And it wasn't a street or anything. Scotland Road, County Road. So, but I will tell you the name of the ship that anchors off. Dan, superb. Thank you so much for tonight.
Always a pleasure, Frank. Yeah, if we're still here, I hope we are.
Don't say that, please.
I'm sure we'll be fine.
Yeah, of course we will. We'll be all right. We'll survive. We're like cockroaches. Me and you'll survive. And our chat there. I just want to say thank you for Jason for setting this up. I just want to say a massive thank you to that wonderful man there facing me, Dan O'Brien. And obviously, the most important people are you out there, you lot. You are the best. And thank you for keeping Dan and myself company tonight with wonderful comments. Weren't they, Dan? Wonderful comments.
Absolutely good food for discussion.
Yeah, that's it. And yeah, good. You just reminded me there. I forgot it. Enjoyed the show. See you tomorrow, Frank. Take care, Paul Turner. And I'll do a film on TV review. You know, so I'll see you all in the morning at 10:30. 10:30. We'll see Dan in exactly 2 weeks' time. If that's okay with you, Dan.
I think so. I'll have to check. I might be away.
Oh, what do you like?
But I'll double check and get back to you.
Oh no, okay. Yeah. It's a pity, isn't it? You ain't going away next week for a week.
I think I might be available. I'll have to double check.
No, okay. You know, just let me know if you are available or what. You know. And we had Steve Mulholland's on there. Great. Stephen's great.
Fantastic.
Yeah, you know, I'd love him to come on. I'd love David Owens to come on as well. I'd love anyone. If anyone on here, you know, who's listening in right now, if you want to come on, let me know. And we'll have a massive discussion. So once again, thank you, Dan. Hopefully I'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you so much.
I hope
but
so.
You don't mind if you don't mind a Friday, no.
No, Friday's good. It's just if I'm available or not in a couple of weeks.
Okay. It's great to
family.
Yeah, look at that. The Anfield. It's great to exercise the little grey cells. And he carries on by saying, Frank, early start, lad. It'll be nice to hear more from Daniel soon. Frankie only gets good people here. How about that? Isn't that a great comment to
Thanks, guys.
And thank you so much. Dan, See you soon, mate.
Always a pleasure. Take care, Frank, and everyone else.
Yeah.